Hello, friends. We are back with episode 202 of the Our Weekly Highlights podcast. This is the weekly show where we talk about the excellent highlights that have been shared on this week's Our Weekly issue at ourweekly.org. My name is Eric Nance, and I'm delighted you join us from wherever you are around the world. And joining me virtually, as always, is my awesome co-host, Mike Thomas. Mike, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Eric. Coming off the back of ShinyConf recently, so it's a fun time to be a part of the R community and a lot of exciting things to be looking forward to and talking about.
You bet. I felt like I was definitely drinking from the fire hose those last week with ShinyConf. Did a lot of new things to talk about, and I'll talk about my adventures on that as we get towards the end of the show. But lots of great happenings there, and it goes too quickly. But like all these virtual conferences do, they do, especially when the content is hot and really, really innovative, like we saw last week. So certainly, if I don't say it already, congratulations to the fine folks at Absalom for running that conference for now. I believe it's the fourth year in its existence, and it went off without a hitch, and really, really well done, everybody.
It's no small feat.
It sure is. And I know from helping organize the R Pharma conference, there was never a dull moment behind the scenes. And at the end, you're kind of like, oh, I can breathe again. So I'm sure they're getting some well-deserved rest after that one. But we're not resting here. We're talking about our current issue. It has been curated by, check notes. Oh, yeah, it's true. It was a real hustle on because right after my presentation at ShinyConf, I threw this issue together and somehow made it in one piece. So hopefully it's a good one. We will find out. But as always, I had tremendous help from our fellow Our Weekly team members. They always keep me honest and really straight to the point, as well as our contributors like all of you around the world with your poll requests and other great suggestions. And it was a pretty clear, quote-unquote, winner, so to speak, and who would lead off this section, because it's not every day or every week that we get to talk about a new release in the R language itself. And what are we talking about? Well, recently, R version 4.5.0 has hit the crayon sources out online. And this release is codenamed How About a 26? Now, you may be wondering, what in the world is that all about? So, fun fact for those that may not know their R history as well, and I didn't either for a while, all the code names for each R release do have origins with the famous Peanuts comics, i.e. Charlie Brown, and their famous characters. And usually when I see a code release, I can kind of remember, oh yeah, I remember reading that strip, or I remember that from the old Charlie Brown movies. This one, however, I was like, what is that one all about? So yours truly did a little digging last night because it was a geeky moment. I'm like, I got to figure this out. What is this all about? So turns out one of the characters named Lucy, who tended to tease Charlie quite a bit, she kind of ran her own, you might call a makeshift psychologist or psychiatry booth where she would charge, I believe, 5 cents for a consultation. And then Charlie Brown came to her one day and asked for some advice, and she, out of the blue, says, well, how about 26 cents? So I don't know what happened after that, but that's where the 26 comes from. The more you know.
Very cool. Thank you for that.
If I'm useful for one thing, it's the Charlie Brown trivia.
I remember Lucy's, psychologist or psychiatrist booth very fondly, but I didn't remember the 26.
Yeah, neither did I until the little sleuthing last night. So, again, credit to the R core team for always finding a new one to spring upon us at each of these releases. So, let's talk about what's in this release. And first of all, how this was put together. This is an excellent post that comes basically after every release from our friends at Jumping Rivers, and i.e. the author this time is Russ Hyde, who is one of the data scientists at Jumping Rivers, and he's done a fantastic job of summarizing a lot of the key points in this release, and we'll go through a few of the ones that caught our attention. I was telling Mike before the show that it was this past weekend, it was the end of my kids' spring break, and I ended up taking them to a zoo over a couple hours away in Cincinnati. My youngest one, his favorite animal is not the one you might expect. It's not like the tigers or the gorillas or anything. It's penguins. He's a penguin fan. Guess what? I'm going to try to get him to use Linux later, but that's another story. But speaking of penguins here, guess what? In our version 4.5, the Palmer Penguins data set that's made a lot of positive headlines in the last couple of years is now included in base R. This is massive achievement for that team that put this out there. And the origins of penguins, we don't have time to get into it today, but nonetheless, one of the motivations was to find a relatable data source that could maybe in the future serve as quote unquote the new iris, or the new set that you could use for examples of, say, statistical inference, classification, roles that the iris data set did play in for all those, textbook examples you find online. The Penguins data set has a lot of interesting features. And now, like I said, it is available in base R itself. And so I'm really excited for that. And congratulations for getting that into base R itself. So that caught my attention. This other one is another case where you might say other computing languages tend to have an influence in R from time to time. We all know its origins from the S language, and of course its, tie-ins with C and Fortran and whatnot. This influence, I think, comes from a certain language that might have a snake as a mascot, because we are now talking about the use function. This is brand new to R, albeit it was quietly released in version 4.4, but I did not get radar of it until now. What does this mean? Well, if you are coming from the world of Python, you may be used to loading your modules or packages with a couple different approaches. You might do the import function, such as like import NumPy, if you want to use that. Or you might only want one specific function from that module, and you might say from NumPy, import, say, the array function. And that way, you've only taken what you needed. In R, historically, the way we've done this is that you would do the namespacing trick. Not so much trick, it's a feature. You put the name of the package, ::, the name of the function, if you want to use it in a quote-unquote one-off setting. And that works, it's in my muscle memory for years. I do this a lot, especially when I only need that function once or twice in my overall function. But now, with this use function, you can now call the function use, put in the name of the package, and then the next argument is one or more of the functions you want inside, which again will now modify the search path that R uses as it's trying to figure out what are you referencing when you call that function, as an alternative to the namespace prefix, and as an alternative just doing the library statement on the package itself. Now, again, I pride myself on being up to date with this, but this did come out of left field, as I would say. But I think for those making the transition to R, this is probably something that many of them were wondering, why wasn't something like this out there? So another fun fact is that there have been other packages in the R community that have exposed this kind of functionality. One of which I know from my exploration, especially with the Rhino framework from Epsilon, is the box package. That has been basically replicating this for a while. And you get more control over that than you do even with this use function, where you could use this box package to import, say, functions from an arbitrary R script, not just a package. So you do get a little more control there for your needs. But I do find it interesting that the influence of another language has now landed into base R, and I guess time will tell just how much this is going to be used in the wild. So I think that one definitely caught my attention for the future. And then the last one that caught my attention, especially someone that's kind of, you might say, greedy whenever I install a new package and it ends up having a bunch of dependencies, I just want to get it done quickly, right? We've seen approaches in the R community, namely the pack, framework offered by Posit, to help, give you a little more modern way of installing packages using parallel downloads and curl and whatnot. Well, as of our version 4.5.0, the install.packages function now lets you download functions and update packages in parallel. That can be a huge time saver, folks. Like I said, especially if you're installing, you might say something from the tidyverse or another, string processing package, and you got to pull down 5, 10, sometimes 15 dependencies, depending on how far the rabbit hole lies. This could, may give you a bit of time saving. So I'm happy to have that now land in the base R itself without you having to do a lot of tricks to make that happen. There is a lot more to this release, and we'll definitely link in the show notes to the full post from Russ here, as well as the full change log, which has its full assortment of bug fixes, other new functions, and other great developments in this release. So, Mike, what caught your eye on our version 4.5 here?
A lot caught my eye. It's very exciting to have that Palmer Penguins package, built into R, so that we don't necessarily need the external package. Although, just a word of warning, it's not a perfect one-to-one. If you just want to pick up, the base data set that we have, the base R data set that we have now in your existing scripts that leverage the Palmer Penguins package previously, some of the column names I think are slightly different. So, unfortunately, we love open source. There is another new package that just came out called Base Penguins, and it's authored by Ella Kay, Heather Turner, and Akeem Zealous, and it allows you to easily convert your script between references to the quote-unquote old Palmer Penguins package and leveraging the new Palmer Penguins data set that is built into our 4.5.0. So thank you to the three of them for authoring that package to make our lives easier as we try to convert to leveraging the new built-in data set, which is awesome. Yeah, the use function is really, really interesting to me. I almost can't believe, if you think about all of the function names that exist or namespaces that exist in base R, that use was not previously used, no pun intended. I guess they were reserving it just for this particular use case, which is pretty awesome. Very Pythonic, as you mentioned. It looks like, based upon some chatter that I've seen on Blue Sky, one word of caution is you can't have two separate lines that are importing different functions from the same package. Like, you can't have one line that says, use the arrange function from dplyr, and then another line that says use the filter function from dplyr. You would actually have to supply sort of a character vector that says from dplyr, essentially use arrange and filter at the same time. Unfortunately, you can't do that downstream the way that you can in Python. So a couple things to be careful of as you begin to, hopefully try out and experiment this new use function. And then the last thing, that really caught my eye beyond the parallel downloads, which is absolutely awesome, is a new function called grepv. So for anyone else, perhaps like myself out there, who has always struggled to remember whether we need to use grep or grepl, and grep returns the position and grepl returns a true false, I believe. And all you want is the actual values that get matched. The new grepv function does exactly that. It's what you've always wanted grep and grepl to do, and what you've probably used string R to do. But now we have a nice base function called grepv that you can supply a pattern to. Your first argument would be the strings, and then your second argument would be the pattern. Actually, excuse me, I think I got that backwards because it's base R. The second argument is the string, and the first argument is the pattern. But it will return just the matches, the perfect string matches, not the positions, not a logical vector of true falses. It'll return exactly what you want. So I'm super excited to have that now in base R for those situations where I need to do some string matching, and it's just a one-off use case where I don't necessarily want to install the entire string R library and try to stick to base R here. It's very, very helpful, so I'm excited about that one as well.
Yeah, and Russ also concludes the post that a lot of the other features and bug fixes that are called out in the release notes are also stemming from really successful R Dev Day events that have been held after, say, various conferences or other meetup settings this is a wonderful way that we're seeing those newer to the community, newer to contributions to base R, really starting to make a real impact on the language itself. And I think that's only going to speak volumes to the success and the future life of R itself, bringing contributors from all backgrounds, all experience levels to help with the project itself. So really excited to see all that. And I'm not sure if the time of this recording, if the binary versions of R have landed yet for, say, Windows, Linux, Mac, and whatnot. But you do have ways of trying this out yourself without messing up your system, so to speak, or putting it into a bind. One of which is that you can use containers or Docker to pull down a new image that has the latest R release from source already built in. You can also utilize the rig utility offered by Gabor Sardi that lets you install R development versions on R 4.5 alongside your R installations. And because I couldn't resist saying this, if you use the Rix package offered by Bruno Rodriguez, Rix now lets you put an R 4.5 in your environment there. So you may hear more about that a bit later. Nonetheless, you've got ways of trying this out. So yeah, we encourage you to try it out today and definitely give it a good whirl and enjoy those new penguins and all those other great features. So in our next highlight, it's not every day that we get to talk about one of the more important frameworks that both Mike and I have been utilizing for years and years in our intersections of leveraging R with building custom APIs for our R-based services or analyses. And it's an interesting situation where you can see in the life cycle of a package, there are often two paths to take as new features are requested and maybe infrastructure needs updating. Do you keep building upon what's already there, or do you take that other fork in the road and kind of start from scratch? Well, this next highlight is kind of that second route here because we are now talking about the Plumber 2 package. Note the 2. If you're not aware, there has been a package called Plumber offered by Barrett Schlurke over at Posit, and it was originally offered by Jeff Allen, who was at Posit beforehand. And that's been my go-to package for making R become an API, whether I was doing a statistical output like analysis or doing some other utility. R was my way to make an API that then any language, no matter R, Python, JavaScript, whatever you throw at it, if it could call an API, I could use Plumber to make that API. Well, now we have Plumber 2 that has hit the GitHub, development over at Posit, and this one is authored by Thomas Lynn Peterson, who you might know as one of the wizards and maintainers of ggplot2, along with many visualization packages. But Thomas has also been pushing the envelope with a lot of web-based request packaging and API packaging because he has authored in the past a package called Fiery, which was kind of like an alternative take on both, API development and Shiny itself. So he's definitely looked at this mode before. But there was a recent, I believe, Blue Sky post or Mastodon post from Thomas asking for feedback on this new Plumber 2 package. So it's a great time to talk about it and spread the word about it. So what is different about Plumber 2 as opposed to the first Plumber? Well, even in the outset of the package site introduction, this is one of those cases where Plumber 2 was born on kind of writing some of the things that they found inefficient from the previous Plumber development. And it sounds like it was just easier to kind of start this from scratch instead of trying to extend the existing Plumber code base to fix all these holes. And he mentions that there are a few breaking changes if you're coming from the first Plumber generation over to here as part of this infrastructure improvement. So we will have a link in the show notes to the full package down site. And there is a great article if you want to try Plumber 2, what you need to do to upgrade from Plumber 1, because that's kind of where I'm coming from on this since I've been using Plumber for years and years. First of which is the function itself changes from PR to API, which I guess in retrospect does make more sense, right? But it sounds like PR was kind of harder to remember, and it was meant to be an acronym for a plumber route. But Thomas says in this documentation that when you build an API, it's much more than just a route. It can be a lot of things under the hood. So they think the API function name is going to be a lot more easier to remember for the majority of users. And there are other key changes, one of which is now if you have an argument for your path and your query parameter, if you do like /something /name of endpoint or whatnot, those are now passed as named arguments, and those are the only things that are passed as named arguments, not some of the other parameters like query parameters or parts of the body of the response that you would have to tweak. Now it's just those path parameters. There is a separate argument called body that's going to let you have different slots of things to modify in the response that you're returning out. There is a lot more under the hood here in the types of objects, such as new objects for both the request and the response. And they are now explicitly called both request and response. And they're gonna really, make things a lot more streamlined there. But I think the key part here is that they are looking for feedback. There is a boatload of existing documentation out there, but they want to make sure users, both that are new to Plumber itself, as well as those that are coming from the first generation of Plumber, they're able to give this a whirl and give them feedback, because they are at the stage where they don't want to lock anything down yet. They want to make sure that if there is a better way to word something, a better way to have a function parameter, that this is the time to get in touch with them. So I have looked at the GitHub repo for Plumber 2. There is a lot of nice dialogue already on issues, on maybe things that still need to be ported from the first Plumber. But this is a great chance, again, to have an impact on where Plumber 2 takes you. And again, we'll have a link to the package down site with a lot more documentation on where Plumber 2 is going, and the new API, bad pun intended, the new API of Plumber 2 itself as compared to the first generation of Plumber. But as I look through the site, there's lots of great articles on takes on hosting, on how you render output, and like I said, the migration from the first Plumber. But it does look like there's been a lot of thought put into this, not too dissimilar to I'd imagine many years ago when Hadley Wickham was trying to decide, do I keep building on the original ggplot? It's time for ggplot 2 instead. It seems like something around those lines. Again, early days. We'll see what happens. But I'm excited to try Plumber 2 out. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, me too. I think that there's some really, really interesting improvements here. I know you touched on quite a few of them, the parsing blocks themselves, because, Plumber and, Plumber 2 as well, it's a unique Roxygen syntax compared to what you might be used to if you're authoring sort of a regular R package and leveraging Roxygen 2 documentation, right? The syntax or what you stick in these tags and how you author this documentation on top of your API function drives, how it works, which is pretty interesting and quite different, right, than just typically how we Roxygenize a function in our R package. So I think it's really interesting the way that they were able to migrate there. I'm really impressed by the level of documentation that they already have, given that this is so early in its development. There's 10 different articles, as you referenced, that span from just routing and input and runtime and hosting discussions across all sorts of different services, including POSIT Connect, DigitalOcean, Docker Basic and Advanced usage. There's discussions on security, a great vignette on migrating, as you mentioned, from Plumber OG to now Plumber 2. I thought one additional interesting thing that's sort of at the root of the package down site is that there is a new async tag, I believe, that allows you to convert your handler into an async handler automatically. I don't know if that leverages future and promises and how exactly that works, if there's additional dependencies that get introduced, but it seems like they're trying to make it easier to build APIs that can return responses asynchronously, which is really cool as well for larger workloads that folks might be faced with. So I'm excited to see how this package continues to progress. I would imagine with the amount of effort that's clearly already been put into it, that this is the direction that the folks at Posit are looking to go with, Plumber as a concept itself. So I'm certainly excited to see how this progresses. I know that there are some other libraries and packages out there that are a little bit more legacy that try to do the same thing, allow you to create an R-based API service. And I imagine that Posit probably looked over sort of the entire ecosystem of those packages, as well as Plumber 1, to try to come up with what's the best possible way that we can author an API based R package. So excited to see how this progresses. I'm sure that this is the result, like you mentioned, of a lot of lessons learned, and appreciate the effort here in trying to build something that's going to be easier for us R developers to stand up API services.
Yeah, I'm glad you called out async. That was something that flew under my radar. And as I'm digging into this further, it does let you have two different options for the back end of that asynchronous operation. One of which, as you correctly guessed, is the future package. There is a future async method, but there's another one.
Is it what I'm thinking?
It is what you're thinking. It is from Mirai, the Mirai async offered by Charlie Gao, who we heard from the ShinyConf, actually, one of his excellent presentations of how Mirai is supercharging async and Shiny itself. So that seems to be some fruits of labors there with some recent synergies. But this could be another case where on top of that, implementation, I think the community may have had an influence on this too, because I remember hearing about a package called Faucet, authored by a former Epsilon engineer, that was also letting you leverage Plumber with containers to do async as well. And I think all that's kind of converging. And I think I think just that need has spoken volumes to make sure that if you're going to use this at scale, I mean, you and I know we can use R in production. We do it every single day in our daily work lives and elsewhere. You don't want any excuses being thrown at you of like, yeah, well, but if you did that thing in R, you're not going to be able to scale to all these thousands of requests every minute or whatnot. You can now. So I think with Plumber 2, I think that's another way of Posit recognizing, you know what, we're going to make sure there's no excuse left at the table for running this at scale. And in our last highlight today, I admit, as a parent, it's really difficult to get my kids to do the things around the house that, would make my life easier. I mean, I'm the one that does the dishes every night, and I'm okay to do that. But it sure would be nice to have a little help around, like, just clean the table a little bit, or, just pick up after yourself a little bit. Things that my wife and I literally joked even last night. When in the world are we going to have robots do some of this stuff? We know in the future's not off, right? You might have some of these things for your, R development as well, especially as you're filling out like boilerplate for like your package structure, or just trying to get 80% of the way to something, but you got to type it in manually to do it and whatnot. Well, in the vast expanding landscape of AI development and integrations with data science, our last highlight is, again, one of those situations where as a package author, an R developer, there are ways you can help, get a lot farther, a lot quicker with a lot of these manual tasks you might call chores because they end up feeling like chores. Well, that is an apropos description of our last highlight here, which is the new R package offered by Posit called Chores. And this is blog post. The introduction to this is authored by Simon Couch, who we featured on previous highlights on his explorations with the Elmer package, which is causing a lot of positive momentum in the R community for interfacing both publicly available LLMs via these hosted services as well as self-hosted services, and the ecosystem that seems to be spinning on this. So chores is actually, again, a kind of a new generation of a previous attempt at this called pals, which is a way for you to leverage, as say a package developer, ways to help you get to the finish line more quickly on the more routine tasks that you have to do, such as you're writing a new function for your package. You're writing the function itself. You got some nice parameters. You've got your body of the function all set. Then you realize, oh yeah, I got to document the thing. So what chores will let you do is you will be able to highlight that function syntax, call up a little add-in, and select the type of helper you want. In this case, you would do the helper for R oxygen. We were just talking about in the Plumber 2, how that uses R oxygen type syntax to call out its parameters. You can highlight that text, and if you're a function body, run this add-in. So a keyboard shortcut to run that, press enter, and then the R oxygen documents are going to stream right into your current R script. And will it get you 100% of the way there? Well, let's face it, probably not. You're going to have to fill in more details, especially around the context of your parameters. But just if you have like 5 or 10 of these, obviously that's going to save you some time and get you there. And it's going to try and guess the type of parameter in that, which can be, again, quite helpful. Now, under the hood, how does all this work? This is an interesting approach, but I'm starting to see why they're doing it this way. There is, in the chores package infrastructure, a directory of markdown files, which are in essence the instructions that the LLM is being given for these various tasks. We just talked about the documentation tasks of our oxygen. There are a couple others as well, such as helping bootstrap a testing framework, as well as perhaps even helping with a CLI converting some previous text you might have done in, say, another package to the new CLI syntax. So it comes with those 3 helpers, but in essence, that markdown file is being parsed and supplied to the LLM every time you run this add-in to give it the additional context in place. They have set this up in such a way that if you like that framework and it's working well for you, you could extend this to any type of task that you like. Chores is just kind of like a reference type of solution to this. But that's got me intrigued by what other ways could you leverage this paradigm. And at the end of the post, Simon calls out some other, packages in the community that have been building upon Elmer that kind of have their own take on this. One of which that definitely caught my attention for a potential time waster, i.e. I need a break from my R code, is this package called Creus, which lets you turn R into a turn-based adventure game with characters and other steps along the way. The LM's kind of got to be the moderator of this game that you play. So that, again, this whole paradigm seems to be leaning to a similar direction. So chores looks like a great start to, as an R developer, helping automate at least parts of these manual tasks so that you can get to that correct answer, maybe not correct answer, but that finished product more quickly. We always throw the caveats, right? Look at these before you sign off on it. All that. You're probably sick of me saying it by now, but I come from an industry where I have to say it. So we want to make sure y'all are aware of the caveats, but I am intrigued by this, and I may give this a whirl next time I write an R package.
If you're going to use this, please use version control. I think we take that for granted, but I could not imagine utilizing something like chores, which is going to alter your code, right, without being able to see clearly what changed. So please make sure that you're using version control when you use this. But yes, it is absolutely awesome. And even for the sometimes AI denialists like myself, and perhaps like yourself at times, Eric, I think we can probably all agree that things like, Roxygen documentation certainly do feel like a chore, and sometimes it doesn't exist because it feels like a chore and it gets left behind because priorities and timelines and deadlines and things like that hinder our ability to write good documentation. So I would say that even if it's generated by an LLM, that's probably better than not having any documentation at all for your function. And ideally, right, the real concept here is that the LLM will generate that documentation, and it'll save you a whole lot of time from some of the boilerplate that comes back, and you might be able to edit it a little bit to make it more perfect, right? But it'll still save you maybe 80 to 90% of the work, and maybe some of just the mental work of actually scaffolding out the Roxygen on top of your function, which if you're just starting with a blank cursor can feel perhaps a little daunting. I know we have some keyboard shortcuts in our studio that help us do that, which have been fantastic, but I think this can be another way to facilitate that process and expedite the ability for us to document our functions. And there's a really nice gallery of these different utilities from the chores package, besides just perhaps the three that are in the video and the blog post, which are convert erroring code to use CLI, which I think is really cool because I love the CLI package. Convert your unit tests to migrate to test that third edition. And then template function documentation with Roxygen, which is the one that we've been talking about. But there are also 4 others. One is for migrating to Quarto style chunk headers. So that's the pound sign with the vertical pipe after it, as opposed to having those particular chunk headers, within the curly braces in the old R Markdown style formatting. There's the ability to format news files. That one was authored by Hadley Wickham. There's one for adding or modifying Reveal.js SCSS theming, which is fantastic, especially for perhaps others like me who really don't know much about SCSS theming but would love to beautify our Reveal.js slide decks. And then there's a ggplot2 assistant as well. So a really nice gallery here in the package down site for chores. And I think it's a fantastic resource that Posit has put together, because I do feel like they're taking a targeted approach to bringing AI into workflows in really constructive ways for us data scientists out there. So I appreciate all the work that's been done on this by Simon Couch and all the other folks at Posit who've contributed.
Oh, goodness. I could have used that Reveal.js SCSS one a week ago when I was putting together my slides for Shiny Cop, and I was fumbling my way through it. So I will be taking note of this for sure. But this is really intriguing part to me, right? Is this community aspect of sharing these additional helpers that are out there. And so on top of this great gallery that you mentioned, Mike, I'm going to also link to the vignette on building these custom helpers, because I think that is a potential to take this, in many, many different directions. Yeah, that's a good preview of what's possible, but I could see, even if it stays within your respective firewall, if this is going to help you do a proprietary automation in your company, having this, within your organization, this set of helpers out there, I see lots of potential here. So the sky's the limit, as they say. And like you, version control, if you're not using that for these, you're probably going to pay for it. I can just tell you that much. And I think Simon would tell you the exact same thing. So nothing bad will happen to you if you version control, even though it may seem tedious at first. I had a situation at the day job where I put in a new thing, but I accidentally uploaded or tried to upload a 100 megabyte or more data set in GitHub. And it didn't like that. That says, that's too big. You got to wipe that out. So I had to go clean my history and then cherry pick commits that were without that. That was a fun afternoon. But if I didn't have Git, I would have been absolutely hosed without that. So don't put yourself in those situations. Use Git, and then that way you can commit it when it looks good. So we shall see.
Absolutely. Yeah, and as you mentioned, these, like we like to say, these prompts that you can create yourself, these templates, all marked down all the time.
It is. It is. So if you can speak Markdown, you can speak the language of these helpers as well as what's built with R Weekly itself. So you set that up and I knocked that out, Mike. All R Weekly is built with Markdown because everything is transparent. We want to make it as easy as possible for all of you that contribute to these issues. We're running a bit low on time, so we probably won't get into a huge amount of additional finds here, but I will give a shout out to Bruno Rodriguez and Philip Bowman for giving me excellent material to talk about at the recent Shiny Conf. My presentation, it was called In the Nicks of Time, a new approach to Shiny development with Nicks and Ricks. It was a bit too much for 20 minutes. I do have that one regret, but hopefully when that recording comes out, you'll enjoy it. But thanks to them for putting Ricks out there because it's definitely inspired me. And I've got a lot more to say about it as I push this in many different directions. I even saw some with Plumber 2 I could do with Nicks that I'm really intrigued about that I may touch on in a future episode. But nonetheless, there's a lot more to this issue, so we invite you to check it out at rwiki.org and put that in your bookmarks if you haven't already. And as always, you can also get in touch with us on social media. I am at our podcast at bsky.social for Blue Sky. I am at our podcast at podcastindex.social for your Mastodon lovers out there. And I'm on LinkedIn. You can search my name and you'll find me there. And Mike, where can the listeners find you?
You can find me on Blue Sky at mike-thomas.bsky.social or on LinkedIn if you search Ketchbrook Analytics, KETCHBROOK. You can see what I'm up to.
Absolutely. Always loving following what you're up to there. And as always, we thank you so much for listening wherever you are. We love to hear from you. If you like us to cover some additional things besides the issues, we're always happy to hear your feedback. But that's going to put a bow on episode 202 of our Weekly Highlights. And we will be back with another edition of our Weekly Highlights next week.